My parents told everyone they had twins, Emily and Sarah. I was Alex, the third child, kept hidden not in a basement, but in a custom-built soundproofed suite deep within the remote Blackwood estate, nestled in the arid, sprawling landscape of Sedona, Arizona. They called it the Crimson Vault, a chillingly sterile environment designed to preserve what they deemed my precious, unique biological material. From birth, my existence was a secret, my purpose defined by a rare genetic marker that produced a specific, highly coveted compound in my blood, a compound they intended to sell on the black market to desperate, wealthy individuals seeking a miracle cure for exotic, incurable diseases. They claimed Emily, my twin sister, had a similar, albeit less potent version of this marker, and that my material was vital to her continued health, framing my captivity as an act of familial sacrifice. I learned to recognize the sterile hum of the air purification system before I knew my own name. My world was a pristine, windowless room, bathed in soft, artificial light. Screens on the walls showed filtered views of the outside, often just the vibrant, impossible red rock formations of Sedona, or sometimes glimpses of Emily and Sarah, living lives I could only imagine. My parents, Robert and Eleanor Blackwood, were meticulous, calculating individuals. They saw me not as a child, but as an investment, a living, breathing pharmaceutical factory. They ensured I had the best nutrition, a tailored exercise regime, and constant medical monitoring. Every week, a registered nurse, always different and always supervised, would draw vials of my blood. For Emily's treatment, darling, my mother would coo, her voice devoid of true warmth. "You're so special, Alex. You're helping your sister." I didn't understand special. I understood locked. The heavy, reinforced door to my suite required multiple biometric scans and a complex alphanumeric code, changed weekly. My only contact with the outside world was through controlled interactions with my parents and the fleeting presence of the rotating medical staff. My early education came from curated digital lessons on a tablet, focused heavily on biology, chemistry, and the importance of health. I learned about cells, proteins, and the intricate dance of the human body, all while unknowingly being the subject of such intricate manipulation. Emily and Sarah, identical in every way save for subtle differences in their laughter, discovered me by accident when we were 4. Our parents were hosting a lavish charity gala upstairs, a distraction from their true enterprise. Robert, usually so vigilant, had left the main access panel to the Crimson Vault slightly ajar. Emily, a curious and adventurous spirit, had followed a stray cat into the hidden service corridors that snaked beneath the estate. She found the door, not quite sealed, and peered through the crack. My first memory of true human connection is seeing 2 identical, wide-eyed faces staring at me. "Who are you?" Sarah whispered, her voice laced with childish awe. They thought I was a ghost, a secret playmate, a magical mirror. That night, they snuck back, bringing stolen cookies and whispered stories of the outside world. Sunlight, trees, the sound of birds. They didn't understand the complex lock, but they understood how to manipulate their parents' schedules, creating small windows for their visits. From then on, our nightly meetings became my lifeline. They'd wait until their parents were engrossed in their evening rituals, then slip down the service stairs, bringing me illicit snacks, comic books, and rudimentary lessons from their kindergarten classes. Sarah, the more empathetic twin, would read me stories, her voice a soothing balm against the metallic hum of my prison. Emily, the pragmatic one, taught me basic math and how to read the complex schematics her father sometimes left on his study table. She even snuck down a small deactivated flip phone, teaching me about circuits and the hidden potential of technology. "One day," she'd promise, "we'll figure out how to get you out." As we grew older, our understanding of my situation deepened. When we were 8, Emily began to show signs of the same rare genetic marker that made my blood so valuable, albeit a milder form. Her energy levels fluctuated, and she occasionally suffered from sudden, debilitating fevers. My parents' visits became more frequent, their urgency palpable. I watched through my internal cameras as they paced their study, their voices echoing through hidden microphones I hadn't known existed. "The buyers are getting impatient, Eleanor," my father would say, his voice tight with stress. "The compound is becoming rarer. Prices are escalating. We need a larger yield." My parents started referring to my unique blood as crimson gold. They increased the frequency of my blood draws, citing Emily's declining health as the reason. The nurse's needles became larger, the vials more numerous. I started feeling weaker, constantly tired. My sisters, witnessing Emily's worsening condition and my own increasing fragility, became desperate. They learned to bypass the simpler security measures on their parents' home network, accessing their father's encrypted files, which, to their horror, revealed the true nature of my special status. It wasn't just for Emily. My unique biological material was being harvested and sold for astronomical sums on an underground biomarket. "You're not just helping Emily, Alex," Sarah whispered one night, her face pale in the dim artificial light of my room. "They're selling you, piece by piece." Emily, ever the pragmatist, brought down a stack of printed documents she'd found on their father's hidden server. They were detailed contracts, financial ledgers, and medical reports. I learned new terms: autologous transplantation, gene therapy, rare compound extraction. One document outlined the market value of compound AX9, a staggering sum of $5 million per milliliter. My weekly blood draws, which amounted to roughly 10 milliliters, translated to $50 million. My existence was a goldmine. The parents, oblivious to their daughter's growing awareness, tightened security around the vault. New, high-resolution cameras were installed, their lenses tracking my every move. Laser grids appeared in the service corridors. The biometric lock on my door became more sophisticated, requiring retinal scans in addition to fingerprints and codes. They even installed sound sensors, designed to detect any unusual whispers or movements. "They're not just trying to keep us out, Alex," Emily observed. Her eyes narrowed as she watched her father input a new code. "They're trying to keep you in." Our shared birthday arrived, our 13th. Emily and Sarah celebrated upstairs with a small, quiet party. I watched them on the filtered screens, a pang of longing twisting in my chest. Later that night, they slipped down, not with a cake, but with a single flickering candle balanced on a stolen cupcake. "Make a wish, Alex," Sarah whispered, her voice choked with tears. "Wish for freedom. We promise we're going to get you out." I blew out the candle, the only light in my sterile prison. My wish was simple: to feel the sun on my skin, to breathe unfiltered air, to exist outside these walls. But how do you escape when your very existence is a secret, a commodity, a ghost in a gilded cage? The next morning, the reality of our situation became brutally clear. My mother, Eleanor, entered my vault, her face grim. She carried a new specialized medical kit. "Today, Alex," she said, her voice devoid of its usual false sweetness, "we have a very important harvest. For Emily. Her condition is worsening rapidly." Emily's fevers had spiked overnight. I'd watched her on the monitors, writhing in pain. My parents had been up all night, their voices urgent, hushed. This wasn't a routine draw. This was different. My mother set up an IV drip, a large, intimidating bag of clear fluid, connected to a much larger needle than usual. "This will ensure maximum yield, darling," she explained, a clinical detachment in her voice. "It's a specialized process. You'll feel a little tired afterwards, but it's for Emily." Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through me. This wasn't just blood. This felt like a part of me, a vital part, being stripped away. I looked at the screen on the wall, where Emily lay curled in her bed, shivering. This was the moment I had always dreaded. The moment my purpose as Crimson Gold would truly be fulfilled. I knew then that my sister's promise, their whispers of freedom, had to become a reality, and soon. This harvest was going to be substantial, and if Emily's condition continued to worsen, there would be more until there was nothing left of me. I was not just a prisoner. I was a ticking clock, and my time was running out. The sterile air of the Crimson Vault grew heavy with the smell of antiseptic and my own burgeoning fear. As the IV needle pierced my vein, thicker and more insistent than ever before, I stared at the screen where Emily shivered under blankets. My mother's cold clinical efficiency was a stark contrast to the terror blooming in my chest. This wasn't love. This was extraction. As the large bag slowly filled with my Crimson Gold, I focused not on the growing weakness in my limbs, but on the details of my prison. The soft hum of the air system. Was it always this loud? The subtle flicker of the camera lens in the corner. Was there a blind spot? My mother's pattern. She always hummed a discordant, tuneless melody when she was concentrating, her eyes fixed on the fluid levels, not on me. My father, Robert, would occasionally review security logs on a tablet outside the reinforced door, his movements precise, predictable. They were creatures of habit, their meticulousness both a trap and a potential weakness. Once the harvest was complete, and I lay drained and shivering, Eleanor Blackwood gave me a perfunctory pat on the head. "Good girl, Alex. Emily will be so much better now." She left, the heavy door hissing shut, the lock cycling with a metallic thud. The red light above the door glowed, signaling my renewed isolation. But this time, something had fundamentally shifted within me. The child who accepted her fate as special was gone. In her place was a survivor, a strategist. That night, Emily and Sarah snuck down, their faces etched with worry. "Are you okay, Alex?" Sarah whispered, her fingers tracing the faint bruise on my arm. "We heard Mom. What was that?" I recounted the forced harvest, the IV drip, the chilling words. Emily's eyes hardened. "They're using you. Not just for me, for profit. I saw the contracts, Alex. Dad's been talking to new clients, more demanding ones." We huddled together, three identical faces illuminated by Emily's smuggled, low-power tablet. This was my education now. I watched recordings of my parents, observing their micro-expressions, their tells. Robert would rub his left thumb when stressed. Eleanor would tap her foot whenever she lied. I studied the security camera feeds visible from their master control room, analyzing their blind spots, the lag times in their system, the patterns of their patrols. Emily, with her growing aptitude for technology, taught me the basics of network security, how to identify vulnerabilities, how digital systems were built, and more importantly, how they could be broken. Sarah, with her keen eye for detail and empathy, helped me understand human behavior, predicting our parents' latest reactions. My confinement had inadvertently built my resilience. Years of precise, limited movements in my small space had given me an acute awareness of my body. I began a rigorous, silent exercise routine, utilizing the small dimensions of my vault, building strength and flexibility. I had to be strong enough to survive the escape, strong enough to exist. Our communication system evolved. Emily started using encrypted messaging apps on her school tablet, leaving coded messages in homework assignments she'd sneak under my door. Sarah, a talented artist, began incorporating subtle clues into her elaborate drawings, tiny details that only I would recognize. A specific shade of crimson indicating danger, a stylized bird hinting at freedom. I, in turn, began leaving minute, almost imperceptible scratches on the inside of the vault door, patterns that corresponded to events I observed on the cameras. The nurse's schedule, my parents' arguments, changes in the air filtration system's hum. A month after the major harvest, Emily suffered another severe fever. Her condition had deteriorated further, and my parents became frantic. They spoke of escalated demand and critical timelines. The Blackwood estate, usually so isolated, saw an increase in discreet high-end vehicles. My father, during a brief perfunctory visit, mentioned an upcoming transaction that would secure their financial future and Emily's health for good. I knew what that meant. Another, possibly larger, extraction. Our opportunity came disguised as a security upgrade. Robert Blackwood, paranoid about the increasing value of his product, decided to overhaul the entire estate's surveillance system. For 3 days, a team of external contractors would be on site. This meant a temporary shutdown of certain camera feeds, blind spots during system reboots, and, most importantly, the presence of new faces, new routines, new vulnerabilities. Emily and Sarah, posing as curious children, had spent weeks befriending the lead technician, a young man named Ben, who had a penchant for showing off his technical prowess. They learned about the system architecture, the temporary access codes, even the brand of the new digital locks being installed. Ben, charmed by their innocent questions, unwittingly handed them the blueprint for our escape. The plan was risky, a confluence of timing, technology, and sheer desperation. On the second day of the upgrade, Ben would be working on the primary network hub located in the sub-basement, directly above my vault. He would initiate a system-wide reboot at precisely 2 p.m., creating a 60-second window during which the retinal scanners on my door would default to a manual override, and the sound sensors would be momentarily offline. My part was simple: be ready. Emily's part was complex. She had to hack into the sub-basement's environmental controls, triggering a localized, non-damaging electrical surge that would create a momentary diversion for Ben and the other technicians, making them focus on the visible malfunction rather than the fleeting security lapse. Sarah's role was equally vital. She would create a distraction upstairs, something loud and undeniable that would draw our parents' attention away from the control monitors. The day of the upgrade dawned with a deceptive calmness. I performed my exercises, pushing my body to its limits, preparing for the dash I would have to make. I reviewed the mental map of the service corridors, the turns, the dead ends, the shortest route to the outside access tunnel that Emily and Sarah had found, a forgotten drainage pipe leading beyond the estate's perimeter. At 1:55 p.m., I watched the digital clock on my wall, my heart hammering against my ribs. Emily and Sarah, visible on my internal feeds, were moving into position. Emily sat at her desktop, ostensibly doing homework, but her fingers flew across her keyboard, accessing the hidden back door Ben had unwittingly left open. Sarah was in the living room, ostensibly practicing her violin, but she held a small glass figurine in her hand, poised to drop it. Precisely at 2 p.m., a jarring, mechanical screech echoed through my vault, followed by the clanging of pipes overhead. The lights flickered. On my internal screen, Ben, the technician, looked up, startled, then began troubleshooting his console. Just a minor electrical anomaly, I heard him mutter through the conduit. System rebooting. Standby for network reinitialization. That was my cue. The red light above my door, usually solid, began blinking erratically. A small, almost imperceptible click resonated from within the lock mechanism. The retinal scanner, usually glowing with an intimidating red laser grid, was dark. I reached out, my fingers trembling, and entered the simple 4-digit default code Emily had provided. 1234. The heavy door, my prison for 13 years, swung inward with a faint hiss. The world beyond was a maze of dimly lit concrete corridors, humming pipes, and a symphony of mechanical noises I had never heard. The air was thick with the scent of dust and stale metal, a shocking contrast to the purified air of my vault. My legs, though strong from years of exercise, felt wobbly on the uneven floor. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. I moved with a primal urgency, fueled by years of pent-up longing for freedom. The sound sensors, now offline, meant I could move without fear of detection for these precious 60 seconds. I navigated the labyrinthine corridors, guided by the mental map I had constructed from Emily's schematics and Sarah's descriptions. A sharp right, then a duck under a low-hanging pipe, then a crawl through a narrow conduit that smelled of old wiring. Upstairs, the alarm blared. Sarah had dropped the figurine, a loud, attention-grabbing crash. I heard my mother's furious shouts, my father's hurried footsteps. They were distracted. Good. I reached the main access tunnel, a large, rusty drainage pipe that led away from the estate. It was dark, smelling of earth and dampness, but it was outside. I pushed through the narrow opening, scraping my skin on the rough metal, and emerged into a small, overgrown gully. The sun. It hit me like a physical blow. The Sedona sun, vibrant and intense, a living, breathing entity that had only ever been a filtered image on a screen. The air tasted different, sharp with dust and the scent of desert sage. The sheer, overwhelming vastness of the sky made me dizzy. For a moment, I just stood there, letting the impossible reality wash over me, the red rocks towering majestically in the distance, a sight I'd only ever seen through a digital filter. Then, a harsh alarm wailed from the estate, a deep, resonant sound that vibrated through the earth. The system had rebooted. My parents had realized. I heard frantic shouts from the direction of the house, followed by the distant bark of guard dogs. I was outside, but I wasn't free. Not yet. My sisters, they were still inside, and the dogs were coming. The alarm shrieked, a raw, piercing sound that shredded the silence of the desert. It was the sound of my parents' carefully constructed world unraveling, and it was my siren call to run. The distant barking of guard dogs grew louder, sharper, cutting through the vastness of the Sedona landscape. I didn't know which direction to go, only that away was the only option. The sun, a burning disk in the azure sky, seemed to amplify every sound, every shadow. My eyes, accustomed to artificial light, watered fiercely, blurring the red rock formations into an overwhelming kaleidoscope of color and shape. Panic, cold and visceral, clawed at my throat. I stumbled forward, my legs, though stronger than before, unused to the uneven terrain. The dust, thick and red, kicked up around my bare feet, gritty and foreign. I could hear the snarling of the dogs now, closer, their powerful barks reverberating off the rock faces. My parents wouldn't send just dogs. They'd send trained security personnel, perhaps even the buyers who were due for their next transaction. Suddenly, a voice, sharp and urgent, cut through the din. "Alex, this way! The canyon!" It was Emily, her voice carrying on the wind. I turned, squinting, and saw them. Emily and Sarah, standing at the edge of a deep crevice in the red earth, waving frantically. They had changed from their school clothes into dark, practical athletic wear. Backpacks, small but dense, were slung over their shoulders. I lunged towards them, newfound adrenaline surging through my veins. As I reached the canyon's edge, Emily grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "They're using the drone. Dad's personal one. It has thermal. We need cover." She pulled me down into the narrow, winding path of the dry creek bed that snaked through the canyon. Sarah, behind us, quickly pulled a camouflage netting from her backpack and draped it over the entrance to the creek, blending it with the reddish rocks. "They've disabled the main network, but Dad's got a satellite link for his personal drone," Emily explained, her breath coming in ragged gasps as we scrambled over loose rocks. "We saw it on the control room feeds before we made our run. We activated a false positive in the northern sector, a perimeter breach sensor in the old well house. It'll buy us minutes." We moved as one, 3 identical shadows flitting through the canyon's labyrinthine twists and turns. The air grew cooler as we descended deeper, the towering walls offering a measure of concealment. Emily, always the planner, had researched the local terrain, the hidden caves and crevices known only to experienced hikers. Sarah, the more agile, led the way, navigating the trickiest paths, and her movements fluid and efficient. Behind us, the barks of the dogs echoed, growing fainter as we put more distance between us. But then a new sound, a high-pitched whine, cut through the air. The drone. It was hovering above the canyon, its camera system sweeping the area. Emily pulled us into a narrow overhang, pressing us against the cool rock face. "Stay low. Its thermal imaging isn't perfect through thick rock, but any open space, we're toast." We waited, huddled together, listening to the drone's insistent hum. It passed directly over us, its infrared gaze missing our huddled forms beneath the rock. After what felt like an eternity, its hum faded, moving towards the north, towards the false positive Emily had engineered. "They'll realize it's a diversion soon," Sarah whispered, her voice tight. "Dad's too smart." "Then we need to be smarter," Emily retorted, already moving. "We need to get to the rendezvous point, my old scoutmaster's cabin. It's off-grid." The journey through the desert was a brutal education. My senses, long dulled by the sterile environment of the vault, were overwhelmed. The biting wind, the sharp edges of desert plants, the sheer, crushing heat of the sun, then the sudden chill of the night. Every step was a battle against my unconditioned body. Emily and Sarah, though more accustomed to the outdoors, pushed themselves to their limits, their faces grim with determination. We drank from water bottles they had packed, the metallic taste strange but invigorating. They offered me energy bars, dense and unfamiliar, but vital for sustaining my strength. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and purple, the full scope of their preparation became clear. Their backpacks held not just food and water, but a first aid kit, a compass, a basic GPS device, a multi-tool, and a burner phone. A device Emily had secretly acquired and loaded with emergency contacts. "We knew this day would come," Sarah confessed, her voice barely a whisper as we found a shallow cave for temporary shelter. Ever since Mom started taking more of your blood and Emily's fevers got worse, we knew they wouldn't stop until... She trailed off, unable to voice the unspoken horror. Until there was nothing left, I finished for her, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. The thought of my parents, their love, a twisted justification for turning me into a commodity, made a cold fury ignite within me. As darkness fell, the desert came alive with new sounds. The chirping of crickets, the rustling of unseen creatures, the mournful cry of an owl. It was terrifying, yet exhilarating. This was the wild, unfiltered reality I had only seen through screens. Suddenly, Emily's burner phone vibrated. A text message. They've activated the tracking chip. In Emily. My blood ran cold. Tracking chip? Emily nodded, her face pale in the dim light. Dad injected it when I was 9. He said it was a new vaccine. It's linked to his personal network. I couldn't disable it remotely without alerting him. It broadcasts my exact location. But why you? Sarah asked, her voice trembling. Because they knew I'd try to get you out, Alex, Emily said, her voice heavy with grim resignation. I'm the tech one. I'm the one who always tried to break into their systems. They always thought I was the weak link. She looked at me, a desperate glint in her eyes. This means they know exactly where we are, Alex. Right now. The silence in the cave was deafening, broken only by our ragged breaths. Our parents, with their ruthless efficiency, had anticipated our escape. They hadn't just secured the vault. They had secured us. Emily, the brilliant strategist, was now a beacon, leading our pursuers directly to us. We can't outrun a GPS tracker, I said, a wave of despair washing over me. They'll be here by dawn. Not if we lose the beacon, Emily said, her eyes fixed on the phone. We need to separate. Only one of us is tracked. Sarah gasped. No, we promised we'd stay together. We have to stay together, I insisted, my hand gripping Emily's arm. We break up, we're easier targets, and I'm not leaving you, Emily. Emily looked at me, then at Sarah. A fierce determination ignited in her eyes. Then we don't try to lose the beacon. We try to mislead it. She pulled out the multi-tool from her bag. Dad told me about how these chips work. They're tiny, but they need power. A constant, low-level charge. If we can disrupt that, or fool it. She began to work quickly, expertly, dismantling the small burner phone, exposing its intricate circuitry. With the precision of a surgeon, she extracted a minuscule component, a tiny chip no bigger than a grain of rice. This is the GPS module from the phone, she explained. It's a different frequency than Dad's chip, but similar enough to create interference. If I can reroute some of its power? Hours passed in the cramped confines of the cave. Emily worked with intense focus, using tiny wires and the multi-tool's precision components. Sarah kept watch at the mouth of the cave, her senses heightened by fear. I, despite the exhaustion that threatened to pull me under, remained vigilant, my eyes scanning the barren landscape, listening for any sign of movement. Just as the first slivers of pre-dawn light painted the eastern sky, Emily looked up, a triumphant gleam in her eyes. Done, she whispered, holding up a crude, almost invisible device, tiny wires attached to a fragment of the burner phone's battery. This is a frequency scrambler. It's not perfect, but it should confuse Dad's tracking system. Instead of giving a single, precise location, it'll broadcast a wide, erratic scatter of false positives. He'll see us everywhere and nowhere. But how? How do you activate it? Sarah asked, looking at the minuscule device with trepidation. Emily hesitated. It needs to be very close to the chip in my arm to work, and it needs to be attached directly to the skin to transmit the interference effectively. You mean you'll have to carry it? I asked, a fresh wave of fear washing over me. No, Emily said, her voice firm. We need to create multiple false trails. We can't all stay together now. One of us carries this and goes in a different direction. It will create a ghost trail, distracting them. Sarah and I looked at each other, the unspoken question hanging in the air. Who would carry the beacon of deception? Who would walk into the lion's den, knowing they were a decoy? The pre-dawn light, cold and gray, crept into the cave, illuminating our faces, each etched with fear and grim determination. Emily held the tiny scrambler in her palm, a fragile testament to her ingenuity and our desperate hope. The unspoken question hung heavy. Who would carry the beacon of deception? Who would willingly become the bait? I'll do it, Sarah said, her voice surprisingly steady, though her hands trembled slightly. Emily, your tech skills are too important. Alex needs you. I can run faster. No, Emily countered, her gaze fixed on her twin. My chip is already broadcasting. It makes more sense for me to carry the scrambler. I can manipulate the signal better, make it seem more erratic, more confusing. You and Alex need to get to Mr. Henderson's cabin. He's a good man. He'll help. My heart ached. The thought of separating after spending a lifetime in forced proximity was unbearable. We stay together, I insisted, my voice raw. We promised. We promised to get you out, Alex, Emily corrected, her eyes meeting mine, fierce and resolute. And to survive. This is how we do it. If we all go in the same direction, they'll find us. If one of us creates chaos in their tracking system, it buys time. And I can think on my feet, use the terrain. Besides, she added, a faint, wry smile touching her lips, Dad expects me to be the one who causes trouble. Her logic, as cold and hard as the desert rock, was undeniable. She was the best choice for the decoy. Sarah, though heartbroken, nodded slowly. Be careful, Em. Don't take any unnecessary risks. Never, Emily promised. Then with a practiced hand, she secured the tiny device to her inner forearm with medical tape from her first aid kit. It was directly over the subtle bump of the tracking chip, her body a living antenna for misdirection. It'll drain the battery on the burner phone pretty fast, maybe an hour or two at most before it goes dead. That's our window. Don't stop until you reach the cabin. We hugged, a fierce, tight embrace, the kind only identical souls could share. I felt a surge of love, gratitude, and a chilling fear that this might be the last time. Emily gave us quick, precise instructions. The fastest route through a series of interlocking canyons, warnings about a tricky rockfall area, landmarks to look for. Stay off any main roads. Move at dawn and dusk. Hide during the day. Don't trust anyone you don't absolutely have to. As the sky bled from gray to a pale rose, we separated. Emily, a solitary figure, climbed out of the gully and began her trek eastward towards the more rugged, less populated mesas. Sarah and I, shadows against the emerging light, headed west towards the distant, greener patch of land where Mr. Henderson's cabin was supposed to be. The first rays of sunlight were brutal, searing my unconditioned skin. Every gust of wind felt like a physical blow, carrying the scent of dry earth and unseen life. My legs, though stronger, ached with every step, and my bare feet, cut and bruised, protested against the unforgiving terrain. Sarah, noticing my struggle, took off her sneakers, handing them to me. They're a little big, but better than nothing. The worn canvas was a revelation. Each step became slightly less agonizing, a small mercy in a world determined to test my limits. We moved with a silent, desperate urgency, driven by the knowledge that Emily was out there, a living target buying us precious time. Through the day, we huddled in the shade of enormous boulders, conserving energy, sharing the last of the water and dry, tasteless energy bars. Sarah, ever vigilant, kept watch, her eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. She told me stories of her life outside the estate, anecdotes about school, friends, and the simple freedoms I had never known. The world she described was vast and chaotic, a stark contrast to my carefully curated existence. It's loud out here, I observed. The constant hum of insects, the rustling of leaves, the distant drone of an unseen airplane, all assaulting my ears. You'll get used to it, Sarah promised, her voice laced with an optimism I admired but couldn't yet share. The world is bigger than the vault, Alex, and it's ours now. Meanwhile, back at the Blackwood estate, chaos reigned. Robert and Eleanor Blackwood, realizing I was gone and their primary asset compromised, launched a full-scale manhunt. Robert, hunched over his high-tech monitors, watched the erratic, flickering dot that represented Emily's tracking chip. She's everywhere, he roared, slamming his fist on the console. 1 minute, she's near the old mine shaft. The next, she's practically at the border. This isn't just interference, Eleanor. This is deliberate. Eleanor, usually composed, was on the verge of hysterics. The buyers are already calling. They know something's wrong. If we don't deliver, we're ruined, Robert, and Emily. Emily's fever is spiking again. The black market for Alex's crimson gold was a volatile one, populated by desperate, ruthless individuals. Failure to deliver meant not just financial ruin, but potentially fatal consequences for the Blackwoods. Their desperation quickly curdled into rage. They dispatched their private security team, former special forces operatives with no moral compass, with orders to find the product by any means necessary. The drone, now equipped with more advanced sensors, was deployed. Roadblocks were set up on secluded desert roads. The hunt was on, and they were playing for keeps. Robert, with a chillingly calm fury, began analyzing the erratic pings, trying to discern a pattern in the chaos. This isn't random, he murmured, his fingers flying across the holographic display. There's a method to her madness. It's a scramble, yes, but it's anchored to a primary signal. If I can triangulate that. He was a predator, learning his prey's escape tactics. Sarah and I continued our westward journey, the sun relentless, the terrain unforgiving. We skirted small, dusty towns, glimpses of normal life, children playing, cars driving, music drifting from open windows, feeling impossibly distant and alien. I recoiled from the few vehicles that passed, instinctively hiding behind Sarah, my face buried in her side. The world outside the vault was overwhelming, its unpredictability terrifying. As dusk approached, painting the sky in fiery oranges and purples, the exhaustion became a heavy cloak. Sarah, despite her own fatigue, remained resilient. We're almost there, Alex, she whispered, pointing to a barely visible, winding dirt track. This is it, the turnoff. We followed the track, weaving through sparse juniper trees and towering cacti. The air grew cooler, and the scent of pine needles replaced the dry dust. Finally, through the deepening twilight, a small, weathered log cabin appeared, nestled among a grove of pines. A faint wisp of smoke curled from its chimney. Mr. Henderson, Sarah breathed, relief flooding her voice. He was my old scoutmaster. He taught us about survival in the wilderness. He said if we ever needed a place, any place, to come here, he built this cabin himself. It's completely off-grid. As we approached, the front door opened, and a man with kind eyes and a grizzled beard stepped out. Mr. Henderson. He took one look at our dust-covered, exhausted faces, at my bruised and bleeding feet, and his eyes widened in understanding. Sarah must have told him something in her past calls, hinting at our plight. "Sarah? Alex?" he murmured, his gaze lingering on my identical features. "Get inside, girls. You look like you've been through hell." We stumbled across the threshold into a small, warm living room. A crackling fire blazed in a stone fireplace, casting dancing shadows on the walls. The scent of wood smoke and something cooking, stew perhaps, filled the air, comforting and utterly foreign. It was the first true warmth I had felt outside the vault, a warmth that wasn't sterile or artificial. Mr. Henderson led us to a small functional bathroom. "Clean yourselves up, I'll get some fresh clothes." He returned with 2 sets of worn but clean flannel shirts and jeans. As I peeled off my tattered vault-issued tunic, I saw my reflection in the dim bathroom mirror. A ghost of my former self, pale and thin, but with a new light in my eyes. We ate stew by the fire, the rich, savory flavors an explosion on my unaccustomed tongue. Mr. Henderson didn't ask questions, not directly. He just listened as Sarah, haltingly at first. Then with a rush of words, explained bits and pieces of our escape, the tracking chip, Emily's decoy mission. His face grew grim, but he simply nodded, his gaze compassionate. "Emily's burner phone should be dead by now," Sarah said, her voice laced with anxiety. "The scrambler, it should have exhausted its battery. Then her signal should revert to the main chip," Mr. Henderson mused, stroking his beard. "And your parents will know exactly where she is." My heart plummeted. Our brief respite, our fragile sense of safety, was about to shatter. Emily, out there alone, exposed. The thought was unbearable. "We have to go back for her," I insisted, pushing my half-eaten bowl away. "Not until we have a plan, Alex," Mr. Henderson said gently. "Your parents are dangerous. They'll be watching every major route. We need to think strategically." Just then, his old-fashioned landline, connected to a long-range satellite modem, rang. He answered it, his expression hardening as he listened. His end of the conversation was brief, punctuated by grim nods. When he hung up, he looked at us, his face etched with concern. "That was a friend of mine, a former park ranger," he began, his voice low and serious. "He spotted a private jet making an unscheduled landing at a remote airstrip about 50 miles east of here, and a team of armed men loading into high-speed vehicles. They're heading this way. Your parents are sending their own rescue team. And they're not looking for just one of you. They're looking for all 3. The Blackwoods hadn't just triangulated Emily's position. They had understood her decoy. They were coming for Sarah and me, too. And Emily, somewhere out in the vast, unforgiving desert, was walking into a trap, still broadcasting her precise location. Our time was officially up. We had bought moments, not freedom. The air in Mr. Henderson's cabin crackled with a sudden, electrifying dread. The news of the approaching team, coupled with Emily's exposed location, felt like a noose tightening around us. There was no more hiding. "They'll be here within the hour," Mr. Henderson said, his kind eyes now filled with a steely resolve. He moved with purpose, grabbing a worn shotgun from above the fireplace, its polished wood gleaming. "There's a back exit, a hidden one, leads down to a dry riverbed. It's rough terrain, but it'll take you further into the wilderness. It's your best bet." "But Emily," Sarah cried, tears finally spilling down her face. "We can't leave her." "We don't have a choice," Mr. Henderson countered, his voice firm. "We need to buy time. You 2 go. I'll slow them down. I have a few old ranger tricks up my sleeve." He handed Emily's burner phone to Sarah. "Keep this. It's useless for tracking now, but it might have data." Just then, a faint, almost imperceptible hum reached our ears. A vehicle, or multiple vehicles. They were here. "Go. Now," Mr. Henderson urged, pushing us towards a heavy, wooden trapdoor hidden beneath a rug in the corner of the room. "Don't look back," I hesitated, looking at Mr. Henderson, a man who barely knew us, yet was willing to risk everything. "Thank you," I whispered, the words inadequate. He gave a curt nod. "Just live, Alex." Sarah pulled the trapdoor open, revealing a dark, narrow shaft. We plunged into it, scrambling down a ladder carved from rough wood. Above us, we heard the crunch of tires on the gravel outside, then a loud, insistent pounding on the cabin door. "Blackwood, we know you're in there. Give us the girls," a gruff voice bellowed. The trapdoor slammed shut above us, plunging us into total darkness. We scrambled through a narrow earthen tunnel, the air thick with the smell of damp soil and ancient roots. Sarah, still holding my hand, pulled me along, her breath ragged. We heard muffled shouts from above, then the sharp crack of a shotgun blast. Mr. Henderson was making good on his promise. We emerged into the cool night air in a dry riverbed, its bed filled with smooth, ancient stones. The moon, a thin crescent, offered little light. Above us, the sounds of shouting and more gunshots echoed from the cabin. "They're trying to contain him," Sarah gasped. "We have to run." Run we did. Our bodies, fueled by terror and a desperate hope for Emily, pushed through exhaustion. We followed the winding riverbed, the landscape an undulating canvas of shadows and strange alien forms. Every rustle of leaves, every distant howl of a coyote made us jump. Then Sarah stumbled, falling to her knees. "My ankle," she choked out, clutching it. "I think I twisted it." Despair threatened to consume me. We were trapped, and Emily was out there, unprotected, Just as I felt the cold grip of hopelessness, a faint, high-pitched whine reached my ears. The drone. It was still active, still searching, and it was coming from the east, directly in the direction Emily had taken. "It's Emily," I whispered, a desperate plan forming in my mind. "She must have found a way to reactivate the scrambler, or the chip. They know exactly where she is. We have to get to her, now." "But my ankle," Sarah grimaced, trying to stand. "I'll carry you," I said, my voice firm. 13 years of confined exercise had built a surprising core strength. I bent down. Sarah carefully climbed onto my back, her arm hooking around my neck. The weight was immense, but the thought of Emily, alone and vulnerable, propelled me forward. We moved slower now, a desperate hobbling tandem, following the drone's distant hum. The terrain became more treacherous, rocky outcrops and steep inclines, but Emily's earlier instructions, her mental map of the wilderness, guided us. As we cleared a ridge, the drone's hum grew louder, sharper, and then we saw it. In the faint moonlight, on a windswept mesa, was Emily. She was staggering, her body swaying, her hand clutching her arm. Around her, a frantic, almost comical chase was unfolding. Not just our parent security team, but other figures, armed and aggressive, were also converging on her position. They were shouting, not in English, but in a guttural, unfamiliar tongue. "The buyers," Sarah breathed, her voice a horrified whisper. "They must have sent their own team to collect when our parents failed to deliver." Emily, battered and exhausted, was deliberately leading them on a merry chase, doubling back, using the uneven terrain to her advantage, clearly still broadcasting her misleading signal. She had bought us more time than we could have ever imagined. But now, she was cornered, her strength failing. Suddenly, a blinding white light erupted from the sky. The drone, caught in the crossfire of two competing factions, exploded with a deafening roar. Moments later, a larger, more powerful hum filled the air, followed by the distinctive thud-thud-thud of a helicopter, and another, and another. Blue and red lights flashed across the mesa. "FBI!" a voice boomed from a loudspeaker. "Federal agents! Drop your weapons! This is a federal operation!" Chaos erupted. The Blackwood security team, caught between the federal agents and the furious buyers, scattered. Gunfire erupted, not from us, but from the desperate factions. Our parents' black market dealings had finally caught up to them. Emily, seeing the unfolding scene, collapsed. I dropped Sarah and sprinted towards Emily, my heart in my throat. I reached her, pulling her into my arms. She was weak, shivering, but alive. "Alex, Sarah," she whispered, her eyes fluttering open. "You made it." "We did," I sobbed, holding her tight. FBI agents, their faces grim, moved swiftly, apprehending the scattered security teams and the buyers. Sirens wailed in the distance. And then I saw them. Robert and Eleanor Blackwood, their faces contorted with fury and despair, being led away in handcuffs by federal agents. Robert looked at us, his eyes devoid of emotion, a cold, calculating gaze. Eleanor, however, looked directly at me, a flash of pure hatred in her eyes, the twisted justification of love shattered. We were taken to a field hospital set up nearby, and then flown to a specialized medical facility in Phoenix. The physical toll of my confinement and our escape was significant. Severe vitamin deficiencies, muscle atrophy, light sensitivity, and dental issues. Emily's autoimmune condition, exacerbated by stress and lack of proper treatment, needed immediate attention. Sarah's ankle was a bad sprain, but we were alive, and together. The legal proceedings that followed were extensive and complex. The Blackwoods faced federal charges of fraud, unlawful imprisonment, child endangerment, and illegal trafficking of biological materials. The evidence gathered by the FBI was overwhelming. Hacked servers, encrypted contracts, hidden financial ledgers, and the damning testimony of medical professionals who confirmed the nature of my crimson gold. Emily's hidden attempts to leak information online, though initially dismissed as childish pranks, had been intercepted by a vigilant cybercrime unit, triggering a quiet investigation that culminated in this dramatic intervention. The buyers, a desperate consortium of the ultra-wealthy, also faced prosecution. Robert and Eleanor Blackwood were sentenced to lengthy prison terms, their carefully constructed world of wealth and control crumbling around them. Their assets, including the Blackwood estate, were seized. We entered a specialized foster care program designed for victims of severe trauma, specifically sibling groups who needed to remain together. It was a sprawling, modern facility in a quiet, tree-lined suburb of Denver, Colorado. Our social worker, a compassionate woman named Miss Albright, understood the critical importance of our bond. We were assigned a large suite, 3 separate bedrooms, connected by a shared living area, a stark contrast to my vault. The healing process was slow, arduous, and deeply personal. Therapy was mandatory and terrifying. Dr. Eris, our psychologist, specialized in complex trauma. She helped me process the years of isolation, the twisted definition of love I had been fed, the realization that I was a commodity, not a daughter. My sisters, too, struggled with the guilt of living a normal life while I was trapped, and the trauma of their parents' betrayal. We had group sessions, individual sessions, and most importantly, sessions together, rebuilding our relationships on a foundation of honesty and shared experience. My physical recovery progressed steadily. The vitamin deficiencies corrected, my muscles strengthened through physical therapy, and my vision slowly adjusted to the vibrant, unfiltered world. My dental work took months, but eventually I could smile without self-consciousness. Emily's autoimmune condition, while manageable, required ongoing medical attention, but she had access to the best doctors and treatments now. Learning to navigate the outside world was like learning a new language. Everything was overwhelming. The sheer number of people, the noise, the endless choices at a grocery store, the casual interactions that felt loaded with unspoken rules. My sisters became my guides, patiently explaining social cues, helping me choose clothes, teaching me how to use public transportation. School was a revelation. I was enrolled in a modified program, slowly catching up on years of missed formal education. Math and science came easily, a legacy of my analytical study of my prison. History and literature, however, were entirely new worlds, fascinating and overwhelming. Emily excelled in advanced robotics, already planning a career in cybersecurity. Sarah, leaning into her artistic talents, found solace and expression in painting, her canvases now vibrant with colors, devoid of hidden messages. As our 16th birthday approached, we began to talk about the future, about college, about careers, about lives that were truly our own. The Blackwoods' seized assets provided a substantial trust fund, ensuring our financial independence. We were no longer defined by scarcity or exploitation. On our birthday, we stood together on a mountain trail overlooking Denver, the sun warm on our faces, the wind tangling in our hair. Ms. Albright had arranged a small, private ceremony. We lit candles, not in defiance or for a wish, but in remembrance of where we had come from, and in celebration of where we were going. 3 identical faces, no longer a hidden fourth. 3 intertwined destinies, no longer defined by a vault or a price tag. We exist, I whispered, the words a powerful mantra, a declaration. All of us, for real. The road ahead was still long, filled with challenges and the ongoing work of healing. But we faced it together, 3 sisters who had survived the impossible, forged in the crucible of darkness, and now, finally, to embrace the boundless light of existence. We were no longer crimson gold, but simply Alex, Emily, and Sarah, whole, real, free.